All right, so let's talk about what it means to be a disciple. This is something that I really look forward to discussing because it's really near and dear to my heart. Something that I've studied and noodled on for some time now and plan to continue to do in the future and to learn as much about it as I possibly can. If I were to ask most people who say they believe in Jesus or follow Jesus, are you a disciple? When I ask that question, there's often two responses that I get. One is, yeah, I'm a disciple. The other is, what's a disciple? I'm not really sure. So for the latter group that says, what's a disciple? I'm really not sure. I find that it kind of stinks that I get that response fairly regularly, especially when Jesus talks about what it means to be a disciple or the cost of being a disciple. Even when Jesus tells his disciples that they are going to go into all nations and make disciples, it's a topic that's fairly common. And a lot of people don't know what it is. And that's not no judgment or anything. It's just it's not talked about in some circles very much. But it's really, really important if you're one of those folks. This hopefully is for you. The other group, whenever I ask, are you a disciple? And they say adamantly, yes. If I press further to say, what is a disciple? What does that look like in your daily life? Oftentimes, I don't get much of a response. Well, I don't know. It's, something, well, Jesus has some disciples. So it's almost like that there's an assumption if I say that I believe in Jesus, then I am a disciple. So let's just start with the question, because maybe you're in one of these two groups, maybe you're not. There are plenty of folks that I've run into that know exactly what it's like and are dedicating their lives to being a disciple the best they can. But let's start with what was a disciple in Jesus's day. So in Jesus's day, a disciple is pretty simple and straightforward. It's a learner, a student. But when I use the word student, I get nervous because if I use words like student, teacher, not that they're wrong, it's just in our Western minds in the 21st century, our first thoughts are often like a classroom type setting, right? So, I'm sitting here, I've got a teacher in front of me, they're giving me information, I'm receiving it, and then at some point in time, they're going to have me regurgitate that information and have me take a test or something like that so they can make sure that I'm learning the material. In the disciple rabbi, so Jesus was a rabbi, disciple rabbi relationship, it was a lot closer than that and a lot more hands-on. So instead of being in the classroom type setting, the disciples would choose to travel with their rabbi, to dedicate themselves wholly to their rabbi. So this wasn't, a thing that you did for a few hours a day. This was complete dedication to learning from your rabbi. If you're to put it closer to something in today's day and age, it might be an apprenticeship, though that relationship isn't quite as deep because you're often not traveling with your apprentice, with the one who is, if you're an apprentice, the one who's your teacher, you're not often traveling with them and spending as much time as close together. But at least in that relationship, if we're going to use that to help us learn what a disciple is, you're getting hands-on pretty early, right? Like if you were going to be an apprentice to learn a trade, I would say pretty early on, you would expect to get your hands dirty, to get in there and start working. If you're going to be an electrician, like actually learn how to do some things like your teacher kind of show you and say, hey, this is how you do this, strip these wires, and then say, here, you try it, right? You see Jesus with his disciples doing things like that fairly often, right? So he goes around proclaiming the kingdom of God. Then he invites his disciples to proclaim the kingdom of God. He casts out demons. He heals the sick. He cares for the marginalized and those who society has outcast. And then guess what he does? He invites his disciples to do that. So if we're looking and asking ourselves about, are we disciples of Jesus? That's one thing, that's a key part that's very important. It's not just are we reading the Bible or are we listening to Jesus' teachings. It is, are we participating with him? Are we applying those, maybe for lack of a better word, into our lives and trying to live them out? Whenever he says to love our enemies, we don't just go, okay, cool, he said love our enemies. We actually live that out. So when we read the word and we see Jesus saying things like love your enemies, we don't just say, wow, that's cool. We actually do our best to live that out as hard as it is. So when someone treats you horribly, instead of retaliating, we're reminded that we are disciples of Jesus and we are becoming like him. And therefore, I'm not going to retaliate in that way. Instead, I'm going to pray and I'm going to love my enemies. And that's the next and maybe kind of final part today that I want to talk about, is that a disciple, his goal was to be like their teacher. And that's why they traveled around. This wasn't something that they didn't want to do, that someone guilted them into being a disciple. It was, they loved the rabbi that they chose and thought that that rabbi was living a life walking closely with God. And so they wanted to be like him. They wanted to be like the rabbi. So if we're disciples of Jesus, we too are doing the same thing. We are desiring to be like him in every part of our lives, desiring to have our character like him, desiring to respond as he responds, desiring to go be on mission with him and do the things that he wants to do and is doing in the world right now.